a weird country, aren't we? We're a weird country. There is outrage over the running back market. Right? And you know what you'll get? You'll get people that go like, well, did you know that the average kicker makes more than the average running back? I'm like, okay, well, you want to talk about a disingenuous stat, knock yourself out, right? Because there's 3 to 4 running backs on every team. That third running back is a minimum guy. There's one kicker on every team. So, if you take starting running backs and kickers, starting running backs generally make more money. None of this has anything to do with anything in reality, which is the real part that hits me right in the chest thumper. Right in the chest thumper. Is that we get caught on these tangents and we get people who act like they're somehow not just bothered, but almost running backs being abused, thrown out. Now, keep in mind that Saquon Barkley is going to make $10 million to play running back for the New York Football Giants. Josh Jacobs is going to make $10 million. And it should also be pointed out that both were very close to getting deals. Did you guys see any of these stories? Okay, Max Crosby, star defensive end, okay, who, if you watch the series, the quarterback got punked a little bit in the first episode, but Max Crosby was apparently sitting outside the facility with Josh Jacobs. They were hoping they would get the deal done. Saquon Barkley nearly came to terms with the deal. So here's what happens, okay? The media has become sycophants for players. And you can track, it's pretty easy to figure out why. Between the former president of the United States claiming that nothing that comes out of the media's mouth is accurate, to every current player having their own outlet, right? The reality is they don't actually need, in their mind, they don't need the media. They can do it themselves. It started with the Players Tribune. Remember when the NBA players would switch teams, they always go to the Players Tribune? That was their outlet. And then players like, why am I going to the Players Tribune? I have Instagram. I have Twitter. Maybe I have, but haven't figured out how to use Threads. And join the club. The point is that between their own podcasts, and by their own, I mean players and former players, their own social media handles, NFL insiders, and I mean, frankly, the teams themselves, right, who have their own PR department, they don't think they need traditional or even new wave media. So it causes the media to go like, hey, I got to make nice with these guys. I got to act like I'm somehow offended that they're only making $10 million for 1 year guaranteed because they couldn't agree on terms to a long-term deal. All these deals, basketball, football, baseball, they're all the same. The longer you want, the less you're going to get per year. There's difference in scale. And running backs, and the running back market specifically that we're talking about, it's all about that second big contract. And if you look at those second big contracts, tell me which ones were good contracts. I'll listen. I mean, Dalvin Cook's second big contract, was that a good one? It was so good that the Vikings cut him rather than have him play. And Todd Gurley's the most famous one. Even Christian McCaffrey, who by anyone's account is a great running back, didn't miss a game his first 3 years. Signs a contract extension with the Carolina Panthers, can't stay healthy. That's why it was easy for them to move him, because they're like, we love him, but makes a lot of money, is not healthy, he's kind of overpaid. It's a position that has been left behind by the rules. You're like, well, there's no other sport where that occurs. Bull. I give you the power forward in basketball. You're like, well, power forward still exists. No, they don't. There's no Horace Grants. There's no Charles Oakleys. There's no Anthony Masons. Where'd those guys go? Heck, there's not even really like a huge market for true traditional centers. With the exception of a couple of the elite ones, and those guys have to play in the perimeter. We've seen this happen in the NBA. The rules changes have caused it to where there's no traditional old school power forwards, and really the old school back to the basket scoring big guy doesn't exist. Like Pat Ewing, how valuable would Pat Ewing be today? He'd block shots like he did when he was young, and then he'd roll to dunk. Outside of that, he'd have to develop a perimeter shot. Even Tim Duncan. Hey, Tim Duncan did not have great range. He would have to develop a three-point shot to be great today because he's not really a high flyer where you throw it to the rim. Yeah, I said it. I don't think Tim Duncan would be a great player playing in today's game because the rules have changed and they made his style of play non-existent. Non-existent. Happened in baseball. Like, we're seeing the evolution in baseball. I mean, I gotta be honest. The San Diego Padres have a player who reportedly turned down $400 million. And he ain't ever getting that money again. Because in addition to the fact that he doesn't hit for power, he's a big on-base guy. On-base used to be everything. Right? In the previous generation of baseball, on-base was everything. On-base runs, OPS, OPS plus, win shares, those things. Now, because there's no shift, okay? Because there's no shift and he's not a power hitter, so he's not a DH. He's just kind of a guy who's not very good at playing his position. The rules changed. The rules have changed on how you can hit a quarterback. Can't hit him knee or below. Can't hit him above the neck. They've changed in terms of RPOs. Now they're kind of liberal with letting offensive linemen block a yard and a half down the field so you can fake those handoffs. Oh, yeah, and mostly they've changed on wide receivers. Can't hit them in the head. Can't hit them when they're not looking. And after 5 yards, can't hand fight with them. Oh, by the way, I mean, we talked about this. We'll talk about this in the pod some. Look at the Super Bowl champions, the last 5 of them. Look at their starting running back. Right? Look at their starting running back and look at how much money they made. Or look at how well they rushed the football. And it's not saying that you don't need a running back. You just, there's no player or series of players or case study that shows you a second contract's a good idea. Was Ezekiel Elliott's contract a good idea? Second contract a good idea? No. The Cowboys, a year in, you had Jerry Jones saying, Zeke who? And the guy who replaced him, Tony Pollard, he wants more money. Why? Because he wants that second contract. He ain't getting it either. Franchise tag. Also $10 million a year. Go and look at all the biggest running back second contracts, and they all have the same thing in common from the last decade. Players can't stay healthy, don't live up to them, aren't the same back. And here's the biggest thing that everybody is missing. Remember that name, Ezekiel Elliott? Who does Ezekiel Elliott play for right now?
Nobody.
No one. It's not because the league or the owners or I'm sure it's the same. Dalvin Cook. Was Dalvin Cook a good back last year? Has he been a good back in his career? By the way, second contract cut from it. Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott are 2 of the elite name free agents. And we are mid to late July. No one signed them. And when they do sign, they'll sign a 1 or 2 year deal. It'll be less than $10 million a year. And you can sit there and try and tell me that there's some crime being committed, but this is a free market. Literally any one of the 32 teams can make either of those guys an offer, and neither of them have accepted. There's no collusion there. There's just an understanding of the football game. Right? If you want to win, you got to have a great quarterback. And you're like, well, Daniel Jones is... Okay, so Daniel Jones took fewer years, got more money in his second contract, but he's a quarterback. And I love the fact that we all think Brian Daboll is a genius and a quarterback whisperer. So if Brian Daboll coaches him and says, I want him back, we should spend $40 million a year for him for 2 years, why do we know more about the position? And by the way, Daboll may not think he's the second coming of Jesus Christ playing football. But you know what he probably knows? Who else out there can I go get? Right? If you don't like Daniel Jones, that's fine. You going to go get Jimmy Garoppolo? Or you going to go get Derek Carr? Who are you going to go get? And teams overpay slightly for shorter-term deals. Right? That's what the franchise tag is. I guarantee the Raiders didn't want... The Raiders' last contract offer wasn't $10 million a year. I think same thing for Saquon Barkley. Probably not $10 million a year. So the answer is you either take less per year for longer guaranteed, or you take a short-term guaranteed deal and hope that they don't franchise tag you next year. But we just have a tough time accepting reality, and I think a good portion of it is the media, and I think a lot of the media and people on social media are, one, look, if you're negative towards anybody, you're going to take a lot of heat. And two, especially with players, if you get in their pockets and tell them they should take less or they're worth less than they think they're worth, well, all you are is a hater. And they fear their access getting cut off. And why do they fear their access getting cut off? Because NFL players probably think, we don't need you. If I want to get something out there, I got my own social media or social media team, or I have the team's PR, or we can leak it to one of the NFL insiders. As far as traditional media, they don't need us. Or at least they especially don't think they need us, because they don't want any truth being told. They want to say, hey, my contract was for X when really was for Y, which, 2Y equals X sometimes. Don't ever lose sight of the fact that in a free market system, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott have yet to sign, and we're like a week away from camp. And there are no restrictions on what you can offer out of those guys. And they're with talented running backs. Not in their prime, but talented running backs.